The World Trade Organization, a presentation by Rebecca Thompson. The World Trade Organization was established in 1995 and is one of the youngest international organizations in the world. Although it has only been in existence for less than 20 years, the joint trading system it was built on has subsisted for over 50 years. The WTO is actually a successor to the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or the GATT. The GATT was established during the course of the Second World War, and in the 50 years following its inception, there has been exceptional growth in world trade, almost by 6% annually. The GATT and the WTO have helped create a strong and prosperous trading system, contributing to unprecedented growth. The system stemmed through a series of trade negotiations under the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs. The first round of negotiations mainly dealt with tariff reductions, but later negotiations dealt with anti-dumping and non-tariff measures. The final bouts of negotiation between 1986 and 1984 in Uruguay led to the creation of the World Trade Organization. Since the establishment of the World WTO, negotiations have continued. In February 1997, an agreement was reached on telecommunication services, with over 60 governments signing off on a wide-ranging liberalization procedures that were more in-depth than in 1994 in Uruguay. The most current and ongoing trade negotiation is the Doha Development Agenda. These talks were ignited in November of 2001, and in the final goals of the agenda is to lower trade barriers around the world, which will help increase global trade. As of 2008, the talks have stalled over a disagreement on key issues like non-tariff barriers, agriculture, and industrial tariffs. The most extreme differences are between developed nations like European Union and the U.S., and major developing nations like India, Brazil, and China. After talks were stalled due to failure to reach a compromise on import rules for agriculture. As of 2012, DDA's future is uncertain as the impasse has not yet been resolved and 10-plus years of multilateral groundwork lays in the balance. The WTO has over 150 members and accounts for over 95% of the world's trade. Almost 30 other nations are in negotiation for membership. All decisions are made by consensus by all of its members and have been ratified in all parliaments of its members' countries. The WTO has a strict line of command for making its decisions. The top level of decision-making is the Ministerial Conference, which only meets once every 2 years. Below the Ministerial Conference is the General Council, who meets several times a year in the Geneva headquarters. The General Council is normally ambassadors and delegation heads. This group of delegates also meets as the Trade Policy Review Body and the Dispute Settlement Body. The next level of leadership consists of the Goods Council, Services Council, and Intellectual Property Council. All of these councils answer to the General Council. There are various specialized committees, working groups, and parties dealing with agreements in other areas such as the environment, regional trade agreements, application for membership, and development. This chart illustrates the levels of leadership for the WTO in its entirety. The absolute bottom line goal for the WTO is to improve the welfare of the citizens of its member countries. They accomplish this assurance of welfare through many activities many activities outlined in their mission statement. The cornerstone activities include negotiation, the reduction and elimination of trade obstacles, monitoring the application of WTO's agreed trade rules and policy, settling disputes among members, and reviewing process of accession for 30 countries not currently members. The three founding principles of the WTO are the pursuit of open borders, the guarantee of the most favored nation principle, and non-discriminatory treatment by and among members, and commitment to a transparency of the organization as a whole. As I stated earlier, there are over 150 countries who are active members of the WTO, so all the individual countries are the WTO allies. By upholding the trade agreements established through negotiation, the organization excels. If there are disagreements between traders, the direction of the organization diminishes. There are many who are foes of the WTO, mainly organization and protesters who are active members of the global justice movement. I will touch on this topic later in the presentation. All of the members of the WTO have a collective identity. Collective identity is a shared sense of belonging to a group. The collective identity of the WTO is globalization and making worldwide trade easier. The idea of global partnership is in enshrining the WTO mandate, essentially having the end target of a worldwide economy. For free trade to deliver real economic growth, it needs to be open, rule-based, predictable, and non-discriminatory. Since its inception in 1995, various pieces of legislation and negotiations have produced notable outcomes for its members. In the Uruguay discussions in 1994, the GATT era, the work program for the WTO was developed. The ministerial conferences in 1996 and 1998 produced new rules and standards. In 1996, a text was incorporated to stress that labor standards aren't on the WTO agenda, although it does endorse future international labor organization and WTO cooperation. In 1998, the high leaders decided against passing custom duties on international electronic transactions and agreed to establish a network to address issues about electronic commerce. The November 1998 conference in Seattle reached no consensus, but it did spark protests against the WTO. The WTO does have protesters and peoples and organizations who are actively against the organization and what it stands for. Those who are against the WTO fear the idea of global and corporate governments. They feel that the WTO has special protections against companies that outsource jobs and enrich themselves at the expense of others working in developing nations. Here's a video outlining some of the protests against the WTO.
The WTO is really the vision and the goal of the world's largest multinational corporations, in that it basically set up a system of global governance for corporate rule. It limits government regulation of workers' rights, food safety, the regulation of important services like education and health.
So anytime we have a case that goes in front of that tripartite quasi-judicial forum, we lose 9 out of 10 cases, whether we're from the United States or Canada. So it's a body that's pro-multinational, and it's been really bad for working people around the world.
There's no question that the reason that they wanted to create a World Trade Organization was to have a global organization that would have the power to reach in and tell countries, no, you can't have that kind of a rule or that kind of a regulation.
Under these rules, there are special incentives and protections even for U.S. companies to offshore their jobs to low-wage developing countries. Literally, these agreements, like the WTO, set up special protections if they leave, and then they guarantee that the products can come back with no border taxes, and we're not even allowed to inspect them at the border very thoroughly for safety, for environmental damage. So it's a race to the bottom.
Hidden in it is a lot of talk about, well, we're going to help developing nations and we're going to help poor countries and people are going to come up. But that just really hasn't largely proven true. And the benefits, when you weigh who's made out better in this globalization deal, clearly it's been corporations who have enriched themselves many, many, many times over really the meager progress that workers in those nations have made, and often at the expense of other workers in other nations.
I hope this project gives you a better idea about the WTO and how it relates to the global justice movement. These are some of the websites that I used to do this project. Thank you for your time.